So let's get started. And first, I am going to pass off to Josh Mason, one of our account managers here at Morphrapps.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thank you everyone for joining us for today's session. Just for those of you who don't know, I'm a business development account manager here at Morphrapps. I probably work with a few of you, but yes, today's session we're going to be joined by Rob and Guy from Imperial College, and they're going to be talking to us a little bit about their data cleaning project as they prepare to migrate to cloud. So you can expect today to hear about the overall task they're undertaking, the scale, the challenges, what they've learned on the way, and also a little bit about how Morphrapps played a part in that project. Now, I'm sure that there'll be many of you on this session today who are on the journey to Cloud Fusion, much like Imperial College themselves. So data migration, data preparation, that might be something you're thinking of already, or perhaps you're not aware about what's coming down the road for you. And some of you might not actually be on that journey to Cloud Fusion yet, but there are a number of use cases around data cleaning where this will be relevant. What you'll hear today will be useful, where more apps can fit in. That could be things like merger and acquisitions. It could be reporting, AI readiness. There's lots of things that ultimately you can think about. And for yourselves, for those of you who are end users of more apps, it is important to kind of look at how these things affect you. As we'll probably hear a little bit from Rob, and you'll hear from the story, data cleaning as part of a migration, a lot of that work very much falls on the end users, and that's why I think it's important to spend some time on this education day, talking to you a bit about what maybe you can expect in the road in the future, and what the scale of the task might be for you, and potentially a little bit about how maybe you could start working on your data now, to get ahead of the game if you are looking to move to Fusion in the future. But yeah, without further ado, that's the kind of introduction from our side from More for Apps prepared. I'm going to hand straight over to Rob, who can start off with his presentation. So, Rob.
Hi guys. First off, hats off to the marketing department of Morpho Apps because I called this piece data cleansing, and they've called it this, right? So I could never have come up with this. So well done to the Morpho Apps marketing guys. So I'll be taking you through kind of our journey, right? I hate that word, but I'll use it. Our journey through EBS as we currently use all the way to where we are today, which is a few months away now. And it really is a few months away from going live with Oracle Fusion. And I'll be talking a lot about data, right? Because data is at the heart of this program, right? And making sure we've got good quality data as you move to Fusion is absolutely imperative. I'll be ably joined today by Guy. So Guy Kelly is our Fusion Financial Transformation Officer. Guy is effectively one of our end users. So if there's any questions, he really does make the magic happen in terms of pushing the buttons. If there's any questions that is of a nature of, how did it go doing X, Y, and Z, I'll probably ably pass off to Guy to discuss kind of what buttons he pushed and how it went. Myself, I'm one of our finance leads. There's a few of us on the program. Kind of my remit is primarily around kind of order to cash and tax. I'm a systems person, right? So I also dip my feet everywhere practically, right? Whether it's accounts payable, procurement, fixed assets, general ledger, etc. So I'm all over the place. But obviously today I'm here to talk about data. So in the brief time that we have today, I really hope we can get through all this. What you're going to know, and what you're going to come away with. So a little bit about who we are, who is Imperial College. We'll obviously talk about our move to Fusion from EBS. We'll talk about how data is a key pillar of that program, right? So forget thinking, everything's about functionality. No, yes, great, but actually data is kind of what you have to live and breathe. We'll talk specifics around cleansing data and migrating data in the finance context, because obviously that's what I do. We'll talk about the state of our system data when we commenced, and I sigh as I say that, because our system data is very poor, and obviously that's proved to be quite a big obstacle and certainly a big challenge as we've moved through migrations. What our approach and strategy has been to improving data quality, and as Josh kind of alluded to there, how we interwove more for apps into that. And I'll sum up a little bit about where we are today, kind of in our program and sort of future plans. It is very, very hot today. So England, I'm not sure where everyone is located, but England is not this hot normally. My background is actually very apt, right? Because so you might see me just sort of, having to towel myself off occasionally because it's knocking on 40 degrees here in the UK. So who are we? Right? Who's Imperial College? Many of you would have heard of us. Some of you may not have done. So this is just really brief. Formed in 1907, so not one of the oldest institutions in the UK by any means. Our primary campus is in South Kensington and London, and that's where we were all based, as in kind of admin staff, if you like, up until a couple of years ago, where we've now got to less salubrious offices in White City in West London. We're a STEM university, so we specialise in science, technology, engineering, and medicine. We don't do things like humanities. You can't get a law degree at Imperial, and that really is our specialist subjects. We have 25,000 plus active students dotted around primarily our London campus, but we have other campuses around the UK and worldwide. As I said, multiple UK campuses, and we have entities now in Singapore and India, which obviously has implication in terms of our kind of ERP setup. Second in the 2026 QS World Uni Rankings and 8th in the 2026 Times Higher Education World Rankings. Obviously, I picked out some of the best. I didn't pick out the ones that said that we were 15th. So yeah, I hope that's okay. So setting things in context, kind of our ERP history. So we've been on Oracle a long, long time. Pre-millennium days, right? So 1999 is when we moved on to Oracle. And I was a wee nipper then, just about to go into my college years. R12 since 2013. You're going to hear me use the term ISIS a lot, I think, right? I'll try to say EBS, but that's how we know the system, right? Imperial College Information System is our kind of colloquial name for ISIS, for Oracle. ERP and HCM, and ERP for us is GL, payables, purchasing, receivables, cash management, fixed assets, Oracle grants, projects, and tax. So pretty much the full suite. And we haven't, obviously we were on Oracle 10, 11, 12, right? So we've not actually ever re-implemented. Everything we've done since 1999 has been an upgrade, right? So we have data in our system today going right back to 1999. And in terms of more for apps usage, we are an existing more for apps customer. At this stage, as in pre-program, we were using AP and AR invoice processing. That's what we're using more for apps for. So our program. So sure, many of you are in a similar boat. I assume you're all Oracle users or mostly Oracle users. And you'll be fully aware naturally that R12 is coming to an end. So we started this journey. So I started Imperial College in 2016, so practically 10 years ago, and we were talking about moving to cloud probably within the first year or so when I joined. Right? It really has been that long a journey. A lot of procrastination around that, obviously, as you do, and especially in a big institution where you don't make those decisions lightly. We had lots of kind of cloud readiness assessments, working with different consulting firms, but we decided sign on a dotted line back in 2023. It was a competition between Workday, SAP, and Oracle. Oracle won the day. And since October 2024, so it will be over 2 years from that kind of commencement date to the time we go live, which will be November 26th. We've been on this journey of implementing Oracle Fusion. So we've had a consultant partner come and join us. They won't be known to people outside the UK, but they're called Namos. And they've been kind of helping us implement the system and configure the system because they're the Fusion experts. Been through lots of different preparation processes, design. Well, we did discovery actually first. We kind of went through our current system. We commenced design back in January 2025. From that, we have kind of almost like our first build, if you like, from Namos. where we did an application walkthrough in 2025 in May. Got our design signed off by all the committees and boards and groups that you can imagine university must have, right, in September 2025. And since then, it really has been the kind of the nuts and bolts of getting this thing implemented. System integration testing in September 25 after sign off. And we've been testing for a long time now, right? So testing has been challenging. And we're still not there, right? So we're about to start what we call PPR testing, so parallel payment run testing, which is kind of what that box is around payroll testing. Literally about to start that in the coming weeks. I'm very validated to see, because I did actually do this slide deck some time ago originally, and it's quite validating to see that I haven't had to change a lot in terms of the boxes. Like, we have stuck to our timeframes. But we're still in UAT as well, right? So that's very much at the forefront of our activity at the moment, is going through UAT. Of course, there are problems with the system. Of course, things aren't working quite as we expect, but every day is progress. So in terms of moving forward, so we have a cutover and freeze period in October 2026, which is roughly 2 weeks. And we go live in November 2026. What we're calling phase one. Originally, I think we imagined this as being kind of very much big bang, right? Everything at the same time. And it really is. It's kind of big bang light, I suppose. There's a few things that have fallen out as we've gone through, and we're kind of now considering this a multi-phase program. And we commence hypercare, obviously, when we go live. And that hypercare period currently is set for 4 months. That might be something that's subject to change. I think we're going to have a longer hypercare period, a longer period where Namos, our consultant partner, will be helping us to support the system. So that's kind of background. So I'm going to talk about data, right? And the challenges for us around data. I mentioned earlier about we've had our system, right? Obviously, it's gone through iterations, but we've had our system effectively back to 1999. And in many cases, we still have open transactions that go back that far, right? In a finance context, things like purchase orders, we still have open purchase orders that are from 1999. So we have a lot of old data. We have a lot of out-of-date data that's not been updated, not been reviewed, things like supplier data, etc., that no one's been looking at, right? And unfortunately, that's prevalent across the system. We have a lot of incorrect data, poor data quality, missing data, missing VAT numbers for our suppliers, those kind of things. Just data that's not complete. And what do we need to do? Well, we need to enrich our data and we need to map our data, right? So we need to make sure our data meets the requirements of Fusion. So classic example that we're working with, like I've got some examples that we're literally working on in the last couple of days, things like zip codes, right? So that's a good example of where we may not have captured zip codes or postal codes for us in the UK in ISIS, but there's a mandatory requirement for that to be correct in Fusion. So we have to improve our data to make sure that we've got that for our suppliers. There's new DFF values that we're creating in Fusion to capture data. I'll have some examples of that later. And obviously a huge amount of mapping, right, that goes alongside that. To support us, I've mentioned kind of the structure a little bit in terms of we've got Namos, who are our consultant partners. We've also got EAPSIS, who are, again, another, not worldwide, but another company that's supporting us around data. And we work really closely with Namos in EAPSIS to get this data migration right. So our kind of key principles, our kind of overriding principles as we've gone into this program, and this is really, I say as we go into this program, I don't think we had this as we went into this program. I don't think we knew exactly what we were letting ourselves in for. But these have come on and and effectively been created as part of the work that we're doing, right? Which is number one, the first pillar, if you like, is where possible, cleanse and enrich the data in EBS. We're trying to, and one and two are somewhat connected in not actually doing a huge amount of that kind of transformation or cleansing activity in flight, but doing it in your source system, right? We've had a number of DM cycles. So we're currently about to start DM4, and there was a 0. So, even with my maths, I can tell you that's 5. We've had a lot of goes at this already, right? Every time improving, every time learning. But one of our learnings is definitely do as much as you can in your source system, right? Because, well, one, it improves your source system, and that's still your system of record for the time being, right? And if things happen and go lives get delayed, you get your benefit of that in your source system, right? Naturally. And two, because it just makes the whole process more transparent and more straightforward in terms of how you get it from one system to the next, right? So there are examples of where you will obviously want to do things in transformation, you want to do things in a kind of a black box because it's just easier. But keep those to a minimum. Keep those where it's really needed, right? And where it makes the most practical sense. And again, I think I should have some examples of that as we move forward. And the third principle here is only bring data across that is current, relevant, useful, necessary, and top quality front. So, as I've just termed it, I'm very glad it's relevant because that would be really, really not good for this presentation if it wasn't. So to make sure you're keeping to that, right, and just making sure that those principles are. Okay, so data migration. Customer migration is dependent upon 4 key activities. It needs to go round and round and round, right? Okay, they don't go from one to the other, stop. They keep going, right? So cleansing is at the heart of this activity. As I said, cleansing at the heart of this program, if I'm being frank, right? Never mind data. Really, data cleansing is kind of the pillar of pillars. So removing data doesn't need to be migrated. For us, for instance, and I'll try to give you an example, I think, for all of these where I can. Dormant suppliers. We've never been very good at deactivating suppliers once effectively they're dormant and redundant to us. So I think when we went into this, we had hundreds of thousands because what I should have said at the outset is we're a very big institution, in terms of transactions, as you can well imagine, right? 1.5 billion pounds of turnover, right, and almost as much expenditure going through the university every year, right? So you can just imagine how many suppliers that might be, right? So we had hundreds of thousands of active suppliers as we started this. And obviously, we don't want to start our new system, our lovely new fresh system with hundreds of thousands of suppliers, most of which we're never ever going to use again. And we're very out of date, and probably a lot of them not trading. Error correction. So making sure that the data that we are bringing across is correct for that particular object, right? So I think I gave this example earlier about VAT numbers, so essentially a sales tax number for those of you not in the UK. So a lot of those suppliers that we are going to bring across, well, they don't have VAT numbers that conform to our format, or they're not there, right, in terms of being missing. So a lot of that work, obviously, is to correct that, right? And side work, right? A bit of a side quest here to gather information, right? So going outside of this work of just doing things in system, well, some of this work actually involves going out and actually talking to suppliers again and saying, we need this, we need that, we need this, because we haven't got that data from you. And that's obviously a huge activity. Mapping. So ISIS and Fusion, Oracle, EBS, and Fusion, while they're similar, right? Obviously, the Oracle products, and that was one of the reasons that we selected Oracle, is that there's a certain familiarity there. They're not the same. Different fields, right? Different objects. So you have to do a mapping anyway, right? There's no going away from it. And so you're kind of going through object by object, mapping one to the other kind of thing. So that's a huge exercise. Some things change in the data models, right? So I've just given you a really simple example there where ISIS, I've used ISIS a lot here. ISIS is sort of the field on the front end, at least, is called kind of alternate contact number. In Fusion, it's mobile contact number, right? So you've got to tell, you've got to make sure that that's part of the mapping that's going on, and that's part of what eApsis, are one of our partners, has been supporting them. Transformation, so changing data. So when we talk about transformation, primarily I mean changing data out of the system, right? So transforming it in this kind of black box, well, the black box of a spreadsheet, if I'm being quite frank. There's a lot of spreadsheets get as you can well imagine, get created as part of this work, huge volumes of them. And transformation rules can be implanted in the process of going from kind of one system to the next. Really, really simple example. We do have a lot of special characters that might have crept into various objects in our current system. And we can say, look, okay, we'll give us every record of a special character, and we'll go in and we'll change the record or whatever. However, it's much easier, they've got, as in EAPSIS, our partners, they've got an easy ability to look at, find special characters, remove them before we get them into the system. So that's a good example, simple example of where doing a bit of basic transformation kind of, in that kind of transit process is acceptable, right, and recommended. And enrichment, so enriching data, improving data. So we're trying to move forward as a college for our back office services. We're not just sitting on our laurels thinking, we want to provide the same services as before. We just want to have a new system. So Fusion gives us opportunities to do that. So some examples here of where we're looking to extend our data, improve it, right? Previously, well, I say previously, really, it's currently not yet gone live. We don't, say, for instance, hold the DUNS number on the supplier record, right? And DUNS number and DUNS number is like credit agency reference number. Useful link between supplier and customer there, right? So that's a good example of where we want to kind of, improve our data by getting the DUNS numbers on the suppliers. And there might be enrichment needed, and that's kind of an optional example, right? Fusion doesn't say you must have a DUNS number for a supplier, but there are some examples where Fusion says you must have X, Y, and Z, right? So whereas EBS can live without contact information, while Fusion says you must have something. So again, there's a enhancement, an enrichment process needed. And just a last example there, which is around, we wanted to capture our original supplier creation dates in Fusion, right? Because otherwise they will say the 1st of November 2026, right? Or something has been created, because that's when you created them in Fusion. So that's an example of, we have to create a new DFF for that, and then map the creation date from original system, current system to new system. And that's an example again of enrichment. So I probably set you up, hopefully, for the sort of volume you're going to see here, right? And I don't know, people on the call, whether this is huge to you, or this is nothing, this is small fry, right, or somewhere in the middle. So supplier management, 250,000 active supplier records, plus a load more sites on top of that, as you can imagine, of which 170,000 were not used in the last 2 years at this point in time. And many suppliers without address information. We still have, unfortunately, a kind of BAU process where we don't capture all address information for certain types of payments, especially to those who are kind of individuals. We don't have the concept here of like a one-time payment. We don't use the functionality, but you can imagine it be like that, right? Where we might be making a payment only for the one time. In purchasing, over 100,000 open purchase orders back to 1999, with all the knock-on and ongoing dependent issues that you get with that, right? Out-of-date locations, buyers who may have left 20 years ago, really old GL distribution accounts held against those POs, right? I'm sure you can imagine that pain. In payables, we had 4,000 legacy AP invoices that were still open. These were on hold and validated. In receivables, not quite so many customers as suppliers, but I'm not sure this is worthy of a gold star. 80,000 customers were active, and these two percentages aren't connected. But again, another example of where we wanted to move forward was we wanted to populate credit risk info into Fusion because we're not really doing that properly in today's system. So again, huge ask, right? So you've got a lot of customers that we want to migrate, and we want to do that with the credit risk information that we're getting from Dun & Bradstreet. £19 million worth of unapplied receipts, a lot of money to anybody, as you can imagine. General ledger, 1 million active account, dual account code combinations, and we have DFFs that we held against certain chart accounts values for various different segments where we haven't got complete data, right? We should have done, right? But it just hasn't been maintained properly. So really just high level stuff here, right? Just wanted to throw out some big numbers to give, to give some scale, I suppose, to the work we've had to do. And you can see obviously where more perhaps is going to come in here, right? When you see these numbers. So why more perhaps? I've probably given a game away with the last sentence, but yeah, the need to update hundreds of thousands of records across the system. Again, remember our principle, number one, try to do it in system. Yeah, okay, so we're not trying to do this in transit, right? Geez, looking things over. We're trying to do it in the source system itself. Lack of automation or any bulk tools to achieve this. Well, you all know that Oracle EBS offers nothing effectively, right, to help you manage this yourself. So we do like to work in the 1980s with data load tool. But if any of you are familiar with data load, you'll know that it's not the most reliable, and keeps you occupied for a long time watching a little thing go across the system. Manual update itself, we do that, right? We have to change a few records, right? Because this thing's cropped up, we'll change it manually, right? We don't need to necessarily use more apps or any other tool to do so. But obviously, we're not going to go and close 70,000 purchase orders manually, so that's just not feasible, regardless of how many bodies you could follow. Very much a lack of central oversight or control. I think that's fairly obvious, right? The way I think data's been treated up until now has really been kind of just, as long as the job gets done, who cares, right? It's probably, I would say, no one will admit to that, obviously, but I think that's basically the way we've worked, right? It's just get the work out the door. It doesn't matter what we're leaving behind. A new day, get the work done. Doesn't matter what's happened, right? So it's just the way we operate here, or have been. And yeah, so accuracy, speed, control, consistency, ease of use, really important principles to remember as we go forward. So when it comes to more for apps itself, as I said from the outset, we've had more for apps. We didn't purchase more for apps, start using more for apps for this program. We already had a relationship with more for apps previously, and have done for many years. Using it primarily around AR and AP, and we'd use the AR invoice wizard to load AR invoices in, obviously, and similar with AP. We're extending that as part of this work. So we purchased supplier wizard, customer wizard, purchase order wizard, and receipts wizard. I say coming soon, system admin wizard, I think we've got. We just haven't yet used that in anger. And you might be wondering, well, it's getting quite late. You're right, it's getting quite late in the day. So some of this stuff is even coming down to doing things in the final bit of migration, right, as we move towards the go live date. So some success stories from the work that we've done. And again, calling out some big numbers here, because I think, well, from my perspective, the volume piece is the one that always impresses me the most, right? Obviously, there's lots and lots of benefits around more for apps, around ease of use, control, etc. But that's the showcasing piece, I suppose, is the ability to do so much so quickly. Close a lot of purchase orders, as you can well imagine. I think we said there was over 100,000 open from 1999 onwards, so we've closed over 80,000 of them. Done a lot of location updates, cancelled or paid a lot of AP invoices, deactivated a lot of customers, added a lot of customer accounts with DUNS numbers to suppliers, added a lot of supplier addresses, did a lot of stuff there, as you can see. in volume to get things updated in readiness for Fusion. All of this stuff is obviously done in our current system as part of our data migration runs. And as you said, they're making lots of ad hoc changes as well. They're the ones, again, calling out the volume, but we're using it consistently. And as I said, we've used more for apps anyway, so it's still in the background for BAU, and I've got a good BAU example to show you before the end about even things that are happening today for our business, not related to the program, we're still using more for apps for. Oh, here it is, in fact. So only because this is very much live in my head, and many meetings on this over the last couple of weeks, in fact, because I'm partly pulled into BAU as well as working on the program. Some of you will be aware of those working accounts payables or systems, be aware of the ISO 20022 changes around payment standards. And we make a lot of foreign payments. So that's something to really call out here. You can probably imagine that we're doing research across the world, right? So we are making payments to 40 odd countries of the world, at least, and in volume. So a lot of changes need to happen here. Obviously, putting a lot more control over this stuff, and obviously every day there's some regulatory burden that goes on your shoulders, right? And this is just another one. So a few things that have come out of this is around structured addresses. That's making sure our supply data has structured addresses, and we're passing that through our payment files. Purpose of payment codes, so receiving banks can know what we're paying for, and clearing system IDs, which I can't remember exactly what that was, but it's something in the background that obviously is important to the whole payment process. Again, using more for apps, we're going to add 5. When I say this is current live, we're about to do this, right? So use of more for apps to add 500 plus payment of purpose codes, which we're going to do at a supplier level. Maybe fudging the process a little bit to do that, because obviously every payment could be of a different purpose, but it's our mechanism to make sure that we can be compliant in inverted commas, and use of more for apps again to add the clearing system codes. So this is again, a really important piece of work. This goes live in November. We don't do this by November, we're not making payments, right? They're going to get rejected by banks. So in the old days, I said the old days now, we'd be adding these pop codes in manually, or looking to do something in the background using SQL. Well, now we've got this ability to do it using more apps. So our future, when we get to Fusion, if we get to Fusion, and obviously we're looking at more for apps in Fusion, right? So this is not a case of our relationship ends when EBS gets switched off. That's it. Thanks guys, off we go. We're already seeing that we're having issues with FBDI. We're already seeing that the desktop integrators are not everything. They don't do everything you need them to do. The FBDIs in particular can be complicated. They don't extract data, they don't import data. Giving access to people to do that is not something that we'd be comfortable, someone in AP or AR having access to. For the ADFDIs, journals is a really important one, and we do a lot of spreadsheet journals today, using the web ADI facility that EBS has, and it's very worrying to hear that we can't put attach upload evidence using the ADFDI journal process. So the ability to get using more for apps, if more for apps offers, is hugely encouraging to us, and we're seeing conversations with Josh around obviously we're having seen some demos, but looking to further our relationship, if you like, around that. So that is all I had here in the slide deck. I'm not sure how we're doing full time. I'm not sure if you have any questions or not, but myself and Guy are happy to take questions now, Stephanie.
Yeah, we have a few minutes for a few questions. I have some for you actually that were messaged to me. So, okay, going back to all of those big numbers, how did you even begin to triage something at that scale?
So it depends. It depends which of the big numbers we're looking at, I suppose, right? But if I were to say, let's start with the supply number, right? So I think I said it was over 250,000 suppliers that were effectively dormant. So we get the data, right? We'll get the full list of all suppliers that are active in the system, and obviously that's easily extractable. And then we need to make decisions, right? Okay, so what are the suppliers that we want to bring into the system? Yeah, and again, going back to those principles of crunch, right? Okay, so making sure that we're only bringing in necessary data, right? Only bringing in data that's relevant, right? So we made a decision, for instance, that we only want suppliers that we paid in the last 2 years. So then the activity is then, okay, let's reduce data down. What's that list look like? Okay, here's the list of suppliers that we haven't paid in 2 years, and this is what we're going to use more traps to deactivate. It's a really simple example, right? But a lot of it can be very, very complicated, right? But when you're looking at the big, huge numbers like that, it does. You do need to make sort of very much high level decisions, right? We're not going to go and say we've got 100,000 open purchase orders. Let's go and review every one, right? Okay, or let's have every department review them, right? Because it's just not practical, right? So what we've done with purchase orders is we've come up with we'll have a logic where we're going to say we're going to close all POs over 5 years, right? Because really that's really age. Anything between 5 years and 2 years, we'll give you a view of, right? Okay, and if you want to keep them open, that's fine, right? Okay, we can do that. We can put it into the migration logic that we can keep that PO when we bring it across. If not, we're gonna close that PO. So it really does depend on the object that we're looking at.
Cool. What was the thing that took longer than you expected going through all of this, I guess?
Everything.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But the whole program is taking much longer than anyone really
Yeah.
expected. In terms of the data piece, I think it's not about really what takes a long time. It's just the amount of work there is to do, right? And Guy might want to come in here, right? But Guy will absolutely attest that his big list of activities doesn't, almost still gets greater by the day, right? In terms of the things that he needs to look at, the things that he needs to review, right? The things that he needs to work out, is it a problem or not? A new mapping that might turn up, right? And data changes between DMs, right? Data in your system will change, right? So it's always coming at you. There's no point of sand. This is a line in the sand. We're just looking at this because it changes all the time. And I think that's the biggest change, is to try to keep on top of the work, making sure that you think, how many objects have you got in the supply tables and the invoice, that like huge amounts, and it is massively challenging to go through that. The other thing that take that, and this is kind of a bit of a, not related to use of more apps in any way, shape, or form, is with our old data comes lots of corruptions and issues with our data that are difficult / impossible to fix, right? So a good example of that is our AP invoices. So I think we said 4,000 of those that were aged, right? And while more apps dealt with a huge amount of those, there were some that were in a state that nothing can fix it from the front end, nothing can fix it from our ICT resources, right? And we have to raise SRs and look at them. And when you've got 200 of those to deal with, that's not practical, that's not possible, right? Even though you try to undertake that work, you get to a point where you realize this isn't going to work, right? So that's and for those examples, where those AP invoices are open, right, we are selecting those invoice IDs individually and saying do not migrate those, and making an accounting adjustment for those. I don't know if you want to add anything, Guy, to that, to what I said
Yeah,
there.
I can jump in just quickly, just as from the sort of point of view of somebody who's kind of boots on the ground in doing a lot of the data cleaning work. So we effectively tried two different ways with cleaning up old purchase orders. We tried using Oracle's PO close functionality, and then we looked into more for apps, and it was really quite a staggering difference having to use the built-in Oracle functionality, which had to be done on a cost center by cost center basis, was incredibly manual, having to go through manually untick each purchase order that you wanted to keep. That obviously introduced a lot of the potential for human error. It's very time consuming. and wildly dull. And then to go from that to be able to import the data from Oracle into more for apps, have a look at everything. And because we're using only a set list, only affect changes on the purchase orders that we have put into that spreadsheet. That took a sort of a week-long job and condensed it down to however long my aging laptop would take to actually make those changes. And so from the point of view of sort of what surprised me about the volume of work, I think it's, yeah, for me, for the person who's doing it, a big surprise was the sheer sort of volume of data, having to go through and manually click them, and then seeing the difference that more for apps. I sound like I'm one of your sales team now, but the difference that it made in getting that work done.
Cool. This kind of relates, I guess, Guy, you could probably answer this, is how easy was it to get your team set up on, I get the platform, but more for apps, I guess.
Uh, so from a sort of end user point of view, it's just a spreadsheet that you drop data in and out of. I'm sure that there's an awful lot of very complicated stuff going on in the background, which would require an entire company. But from our point of view, it is just talking to the sort of tech folks at More for Apps, getting the licenses sorted, and then once you've got that, just sort of setting who in the organization has the usage rights for that particular aspect of More for Apps, and then you're sort of generally good to go.
I'll put my hand up there only because I don't know how to use Zoom that well, and I don't know if there's like a hands up function. So I'll answer that more widely. So in terms of, because I think it's interesting to know a team formation in terms of data cleansing in itself, right? So because we didn't have a data cleansing team, there was no concept of this, right, when we started this program, obviously because we got really bad data. So and it kind of organically grew. We didn't go when we kicked the program off. We didn't say we need a data team, right? We need like people to do X, Y, and Z. Right? That's not how it went at all. But it emerged very quickly how poor our data was. So so we put in a team where effectively you got myself, I suppose, as a lead, especially around the kind of the majority of the ERP side of things. And then we've got ICT involved as well. So we have an ICT PM who supports, and if there's something that requires ICT involvement, she can bring in those resources because I don't have access to them necessarily. And then we've got not just Guy. So Guy obviously looking at P2P in particular, but we've got Sarah. Some of these guys may well be on the call. Apologies if I call your name out. But we've got like Sarah, who's supporting on P2P. We've got Nina, who's like our O2C specialist. Delaney as well with Nina for a similar kind of role. And we've got others in the AR team as well who've all supported this work, right? So you know, there's a team, and none of us are obviously full-time on data as such. Guy's probably the closest to it. But there is obviously a team that's formed that looks at this, and we meet weekly to discuss kind of progress, etc. So that's kind of how we're running it internally as part of the program.
Great. So I actually have one more question from me just to wrap it up. For Rob and Guy, what would be like your number one advice to anybody who is currently migrating to Fusion, whether it's early, in the middle of it, near the end? What is your number one advice for anybody? Yeah.
Next question. It's I put me on the spot. Guy, have you got anything instantly in your head before
Yeah, I'd say that a few days spent looking at what solutions are available, and then the sort of week or so required to talk to whoever you need to talk to within your organization to get access to tools that you might not already have is worth a month's worth of some poor fool like me manually going through whatever system that you have. It's well worth spending that time to, I guess, get all your ducks in a row, look at what is available, and not just stick with what's always been done.
So I'll add to that and say, and this might be a few things I'm going to say here as number one, right? So apologies, is don't underestimate the work. I think that's clear really from my presentation. Make sure you've got enough time and you've got enough cycles, right? You're not going to do this in one or two. You're going to learn a lot through this process, right? Even us having 5 cycles a day, I wish we're going to have 7 or 8 or 9, because every one you learn a little bit more about your data, and you learn a little bit more about the process once your data is in the new system. Something as well that I will call out, because we fall foul of this already so far, and we haven't had a chance to fix this. It's frustrating. Is when you put your data into an environment that is about to be used for SIT, UAT, making sure there's ample time to do the reconciliation of that before stuff starts happening in that environment. Right? Okay, so we fall foul now a little bit in that we haven't given enough time for that. So we haven't been able to do an APTB before, so accounts payable trial balance before loads of transactions start hitting it, because they're pushing through integrations, people doing manual transactions. So just make sure that is part of your timescales, right? You've got time where it's just the migrated data that you're looking at.
Great. Well, I am going to wrap it up. So I just want to thank everyone for joining, and also a big, huge thank you to Rob and Guy for taking the lead today, especially during peak hours during a heat wave. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you can get cool after this. But thank you again. And anything you guys would like to say, just parting words?
No, I'm really happy it's over, because I had to shut the back door because there's a dog barking from next door, and now I can open
Yeah.
and get some air in. So, but really, really good to do it. Really happy to do it, and good luck to anyone out there who's on a similar job.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a good one.
Thanks.